We flew in over a jungle that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in 100 years. Just a crawling mass of green, layers of it, from canopy to floor, so dense you couldn't tell one shadow from the next. No villages, no trails, just trees, endless trees. There were 7 of us, all special recon, flown in on black orders and handed gear that didn't exist. No name tags, no insignias, only one clear directive: find the source, neutralize it. They didn't tell us what it was, just that there were 4 villages, gone, not abandoned, not burned, gone, flattened. We saw the satellite stills, no bodies, no structures, just ground, as if something had stepped on the earth and pushed until everything vanished. The official term was unknown biological threat. We were told it might be a species of aggressive megafauna, something undocumented. The eggheads tossed around territorial behavior and feeding zones. Nobody knew shit. The C-47 dropped us into a small clearing at 0 hours 300. No moon, just black. We rappelled down and watched the trees swallow us. No base camp, no support, just boots on the ground and a satellite ping once every 6 hours. We hiked 3 clicks before sunrise and made our first camp on a ridge above the river. There were no animal sounds, no frogs, no insects, just the occasional rustle in the leaves, too rhythmic to be the wind. Nobody said it, but we all felt that something was wrong. We found the first crater at noon. Not a sinkhole, not a bomb site, a footprint, 7 feet deep, maybe 30 feet from toe to heel, pressed into solid earth. One edge still oozed water where the weight had forced the groundwater up. Whatever made it had passed through recently. Corporal Lawton stood inside it, dwarfed. "I thought this shit was a myth," he said. Nobody responded. We followed the tracks north. They weren't in a line, more like a wandering path. Trees torn out of the ground, roots in the air. Not slashed, not chewed, just crushed. We found the remains of a village by evening. It didn't look like a village anymore. Just scattered wood, warped metal, and a half-flattened motorbike embedded in the trunk of a tree like it had been thrown there. No people, no blood, not even ash. The only thing left standing was a half-buried hut frame. Inside, we found a steel shipping container, partially crushed. The contents were scattered: bags of rice, clothes, and bones, human bones, cracked in half, gnawed, bite radius the size of a dinner plate. Staff Sergeant Wells called it in on the sat phone. He didn't even finish the report. The line died midway. And then we heard the first scream, far off, muffled by the jungle, but unmistakably human. We moved toward it, fast. And that's when we heard the footsteps, boom, 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 like distant thunder. Not in the air, in the ground. Each one made the trees shift. Birds burst into the air. Somewhere in the jungle, an entire grove of palms tilted like dominoes. It was still at least half a mile off, but the sound rolled like a wave. We stopped. Everyone dropped low. Through a gap in the trees, I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a ridge of stone rising above the canopy. Then it moved. A massive shoulder, gray and scarred, with patches of matted black hair. A hand the size of a car door pulled down an entire tree. Not for food, just to get it out of the way. Its head passed into view. Human-shaped, but wrong. Elongated. No neck, just sloped muscles running straight from skull to shoulders. The jaw was wide, brutal, not designed to speak, just to bite. It didn't look around. It didn't sniff the air. It just moved forward, slow and steady, flattening everything in its path. No hesitation, no caution. It didn't fear anything. We watched it for 2 full minutes, frozen in place. When it moved behind the ridge and the jungle swallowed it again, we finally exhaled. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Wells wiped sweat from his mouth. "We move south. Double time. We don't engage." "Why not call in an airstrike?" Lawton asked. Wells didn't answer. We all knew why. It was too close, and the trees were too dense. We were stuck with boots and rifles and two AT-4S, one of which had a cracked casing. We hiked until dark, set up camp on a stony rise above the mudline, dug in, lights off, no fire, nobody slept. The ground trembled once around 0300, then again an hour later. Distant, but not gone, like it was circling, and then came the smell. Rot, meat, wet earth. The air shifted like it does before a storm. Thick, heavy, pressed down on your chest. We stayed absolutely still. At 5:12, one of the perimeter sensors went off. A soft click, then a thunk. We didn't fire, we didn't move. Outside the trees, I saw movement, barely lit by the green of our night optics. An arm, huge, fingers dragging through the foliage, not reaching, just brushing past. Then a footstep. The whole ridge shook. Something the size of a mobile home lumbered past our position. I could see its calf muscle tense with each step. The skin was pocked with scars, lacerations, bullet marks. Someone had tried to shoot it before. It hadn't worked. By dawn, it was gone again. But it had passed within 30 feet of us, and never once looked down, like we weren't even worth noticing. By sunrise, we were already moving again. There wasn't a word spoken over breakfast. Not that anyone was eating much, just protein bars chewed in silence, hands trembling slightly while checking rifles and repacking gear. The jungle was brighter now, but no less heavy. Light didn't chase away what we'd seen. We didn't talk about the giant, not the way you talk about enemies. It felt more like whispering about a storm. It wasn't something to fight. It was something to survive, and maybe not even that. Staff Sergeant Wells took point, jaw clenched. Lawton followed, then me. Martinez and Keller flanked rear. The other three rotated on overwatch and flank watch. The jungle was too thick to move tactically the way we'd been trained. We couldn't set up perimeters or hold a real formation. It was single file, machete through vines, boots sinking in black mud that gurgled under every step. We'd gone maybe half a click before we found another trail. Not a game trail, not even an elephant track. This was more like a swath, 10 feet across, trees pushed over in both directions, underbrush stomped flat. The broken trunks still leaked sap. The air stank of mold and the iron tinge of blood. The ground was soft, ripped apart by footprints that punched 6 to 8 inches deep into the clay. Some of them had pooled with water. Big bastard came through here, Keller muttered. More than one, said Lawton. He pointed. He was right. There were overlapping tracks, some wider, some slightly narrower, but all of them impossibly large. Whatever had passed through had come in a group, and not a slow one. You could see where branches had snapped off mid-height, 20 feet up. Moving fast, Martinez said. Like they were chasing something, or running from something, I offered, but no one acknowledged it. We followed the path for another 2 hours heading west. It was easier going, no need to cut brush, not with the forest already mangled, but the ease made it worse somehow, like we were walking inside their footprints. At 10:13, we found what was left of the next village. The approach was bad. You could smell it before you saw it. Not burning, not waste, something worse, something deep, like old meat pulled from a drain. The trees opened into a clearing, and then we saw the devastation. It wasn't like the last one. This wasn't flattened. This was smashed. Huts crushed from above. Pieces of tin and tarps scattered like confetti. A generator was embedded in the trunk of a tree, 20 feet off the ground, as if it had been thrown. Blood stained the dirt in dark spirals mixed with shattered bones and hair. No bodies, not whole ones anyway. Lawton stepped into the wreckage and knelt by what looked like a child's sandal, mangled, torn in half. Jesus, he breathed. No bullet casings, I said. No signs of a fight. They didn't have time, Wells said. They never even heard it coming. He was right. There were no signs of resistance, no defensive positions. Whatever had happened here had happened fast. 1 second they were breathing. The next, they were pulp. Behind the village was a ravine, a natural ditch maybe 30 feet deep. a place where water had once carved through the soil. We found drag marks leading toward it, deep grooves. Something had been pulled down there. We advanced slowly, rifles raised. Martinez took point down the incline, slipping on the loose earth. His boots struck something slick, and he fell. We rushed down after him. He was okay. But what he'd landed on wasn't. It was a torso, just a torso. No legs, no arms, no head. The flesh looked stripped, not chewed but torn in chunks, as if fingers the size of crowbars had dug into the skin and peeled it away in strips. Bones jutted from the mess, pale and snapped. Martinez gagged and fell back. Lawton dry heaved. I looked up the slope and saw more, at least a dozen half buried, crushed, torn, split apart like wet bags of groceries. No predators, no scavengers, even the insects stayed away. I checked the radio, still no signal. Wells stood over the bodies, silent, then said, "We leave now. Backtrack 5 clicks." "We don't follow these things." No one disagreed. We started east again, following our own boot prints back toward the collapsed grove. We moved fast, too fast. The jungle made us pay for it. Roots snagged our boots, vines clawed at our gear. The sun was hotter now, baking the stench of death into our clothes. We made it 2 clicks before the wind changed. It hit us all at once, a wave of heat and rot. The trees bowed, the leaves went still. The jungle stopped breathing. We didn't need to say a word. We all knew. They were close. Wells raised a fist. We stopped, and then came the first crack. A tree somewhere to our right snapped in half. A second later, another. The sound was like lightning. Then the ground shook. I mean shook. Not like a vibration, not like distant thunder. This was a full-body jolt. My legs wobbled, teeth rattled. Martinez fell to one knee. Then came the roar. Not an animal sound, not vocal. It was like a storm cloud split open, a roar made of force, not sound. No emotion, no warning, just a shockwave of pure bellowing rage. They weren't hunting us, they were charging. "Contact left," Keller screamed. We scattered just as the first one broke the tree line. It was massive, 40, maybe 50 feet tall. Pale gray skin, patched with mud. Its chest heaved like a steam engine. Its eyes were sunk beneath a jutting brow. Its mouth opened, no scream, no roar, just teeth. Flat teeth, grinding teeth. It didn't see us. It didn't need to. It swung its arm once and took down an entire row of trees. The trunks folded like matchsticks. Debris exploded in every direction. Lawton screamed, his leg crushed by a falling branch the size of a car. Then the second giant appeared. It was smaller, maybe 40 feet, but faster. It was running, not lumbering, running. We fired everything. Rifles cracked, saw rounds tore the air. Keller fired the first at 4. It hit the giant in the ribs and exploded in a fireball. The thing stumbled, just stumbled, then kept coming. Blood poured down its side, thick and dark, but it didn't slow. It didn't even scream, just turned toward the flash and kept moving. It stepped on Martinez. I saw it happen. 1 second he was firing, screaming into the jungle. The next, gone. A leg came down, not fast, not deliberate, just down, and he vanished. When the foot lifted, there was nothing left but mud and red water. We ran. No formation, no direction, just survival. I ducked under roots, through vines, leapt a ravine, and nearly broke my ankle on the other side. Lawton was down. Keller had vanished. Wells was bleeding from his scalp, eyes wide with shock. We heard them behind us, trees breaking, steps pounding. The roar again, closer this time. Too close. We found a ridge, steep, muddy, but high. We climbed. I slipped 3 times, lost my rifle, just kept crawling. Wells was behind me. I reached for him, grabbed his vest, pulled. We made the top, collapsed behind a stone outcrop. The jungle below us exploded. The 2 giants stood at the base of the ridge, heads turning slowly, They didn't climb. They didn't look up. They just stopped, waited. Then one of them squatted, picked up a chunk of tree trunk and sniffed it, then ate it. Bark, rot, mud, everything. Then they turned and walked away. Not in defeat, not in confusion, just full. Wells was shaking beside me. "We're not killing these things," he said. "We're not winning." I couldn't speak. I watched them disappear into the trees, just backs now, shoulders like cliff faces, arms brushing treetops. They didn't run. They didn't need to. We were nothing. We were insects, and they were just passing through. We stayed on the ridge until sundown, not because it was safe, it wasn't, but because none of us could move. Wells was slumped against the rocks, head bleeding, shirt soaked in sweat. He'd ripped his sleeve into a makeshift bandage for his arm, which had taken a nasty slice from debris on the climb. His eyes never stopped scanning the trees. I didn't say anything. I just watched the jungle below, still, quiet. You'd never know two monsters the size of houses had just torn through there. The trees swayed with the wind again. The birds came back. But something in the air had changed. There was less of it, heavier, damp with a scent I now recognized instantly. Blood, soil, and whatever those things carried on their skin. Something primal, like a butcher's apron soaked in rainwater. We had 3 confirmed dead. Martinez crushed, Keller vanished, Lawton left behind with a shattered leg. The rest of us, me, Wells, and Private Brinks, were all that remained of the original 7. Brinks was young, maybe 20. Hadn't said a word since the ambush. He just stared at the horizon, clutching his rifle like it was a security blanket. "We need to exfil," I said. "Backtrack to the drop zone. Call for pickup. There's no mission left." Wells didn't respond at first. Then, barely audible, "They'll just send more." "Then let them," I said. "We're done." Wells slowly stood, winced, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and tightened the makeshift sling around his arm. "Southwest," he muttered. "High ground and water." We followed the ridge. We moved slow. Every few minutes we'd stop and listen, dead still. The jungle always filled with noise after a while, but the deeper we went, the more we realized it wasn't the same. The sounds would cut off mid-call. Birdsong would stop like someone had pressed pause. It was all wrong. At dusk, we reached a bend in the ridge where the trees opened up enough to see the canopy stretch for miles. That's when I saw them. More of them, not just 1 or 2. 6, maybe 7, walking in a staggered line across the forest below us, heading north. Each one took up its own path. Trees snapped with every step. They weren't coordinated, not a formation, just a herd. My breath caught. The closest one passed directly beneath a shaft of dying sunlight, and I saw its back, scarred and matted, with open patches where the skin had rubbed off against trees. Its arms hung nearly to its knees bent the wrong way. It wasn't graceful. It didn't need to be. Wells crouched beside me, staring. "They traveled together," he said. I didn't speak. I was too busy watching what came behind them. The last one was dragging something, not prey, not a person, a tree, uprooted, stripped, held in one hand like a walking stick. No purpose, no tool. It just wanted to drag it. The noise they made wasn't a roar or a scream. It was just the sound of living mass colliding with everything in its path. Trees falling, branches shattering, birds exploding out of the canopy, and every step, every single step, thudded through my ribcage. We pulled back, down the far side of the ridge, keeping low, moving through a steep, rocky descent that opened into thicker jungle. It was darker there. The ground was wet. Roots snaked across the path like tripwires. Brinks slipped twice. We kept moving. An hour later, we reached what looked like a logging road, overgrown but flat enough to move faster. Maybe a path left behind by villagers before their town vanished. That's when Brinks spoke. "They don't look at us." I turned. "What?" "The giants," he said, voice hollow. "They don't look at us, not even once. Even when they're right on top of us." He was right. Martinez had been screaming when he died. The giant didn't even glance down. "They don't have to," I said. "They don't need to see, they just move. And we're in the way." Brinks looked back the way we'd come. "Then what are they following?" We kept moving. None of us wanted to answer that question. We camped for the night beneath a natural stone outcrop beside a dried-up stream bed. No fire, no light, just darkness and the sound of Brinks shaking with every breeze. Wells stayed on first watch. I don't think any of us actually slept. The sound started again around 0300. Faint, like distant trees falling in sequence, far off, not approaching, just moving, a path of destruction, echoing through the forest like a drumbeat. They weren't chasing us, but they were everywhere. At dawn, we followed the stream bed southwest. It was narrow, muddy, and full of thorny vines, but it kept us low, harder to see, easier to move without leaving tracks. We hadn't gone half a mile before the stench hit us again, same as before, rot, meat, sweat, and something else, a bitter burned smell. We slowed. Then we found what was left of another recon unit, 3 men. One had been slammed into a tree so hard he was folded backwards around the trunk. Another lay in a bush, his body torn open at the midsection, no chewing, just ripped. The third was barely a body at all, just gear and blood scattered in a wide radius. Wells found a patch with a unit number. Not ours. He said, "They sent others." I nodded. Brinks found a flare gun among the wreckage. Only 1 round left. He tucked it into his vest and didn't say a word. We pushed on. By noon, the jungle opened again. An old farming plateau, now overgrown and half swallowed by vines and moss. But flat, with visibility. We stopped to rest. That's when we saw movement at the far end of the field. Not a giant. A man, running, covered in blood. His uniform was torn. He looked military, maybe from the same lost unit. We stood, raised our weapons. Wells shouted. The man turned, his face twisted, not in terror, but in sheer animal panic. He didn't run toward us. He ran past us, didn't say a word, just sprinted full speed into the trees. That's when we heard it, a low boom, then another, then another. We turned. A giant came through the far tree line, 50 feet tall, matted hair, long limbs, streaked with blood from foot to elbow. It didn't roar, it didn't look around. It knew. It had been chasing the man, and now it saw us, or at least it felt us. It changed direction mid-step, started running, straight toward us. Wells fired. Brinks fired. I grabbed the second at 4 from my back and dropped to a knee. Aimed. Fired. The rocket slammed into the giant's hip. It stumbled, but it didn't fall. It kept coming. I ran. So did Brinks. Wells stayed behind. He didn't run. He pulled his rifle off his sling and emptied the mag into the thing's face. Then he went quiet. I didn't see what happened, but the sound of bones crushing and ground splitting, it told me enough. Brinks and I made the other side of the plateau. We dove into a trench dug by an old irrigation line and kept crawling until the sound faded. Then we lay there, for a long time, listening. The jungle was quiet again, and we were alone, just the 2 of us now. 2 men, miles from extraction, with 1 rocket left, and a world full of monsters that didn't know what we were. Didn't care, just kept moving, because to them, we weren't a threat. We weren't even prey. We were ants underfoot. We stayed in the trench until nightfall. Brinks didn't talk, just sat with his back to the dirt wall, fingers locked around the grip of his rifle like he was afraid to let go. He stared at nothing, mouth half open, eyes too wide. His lips moved every now and then, but no sound came out. I wanted to check his pulse, make sure he wasn't going into shock, but I didn't. I just sat with him. I figured whatever he was dealing with didn't need fixing. It needed time, and we didn't have much of that. When it got dark, the jungle changed again. The normal calls and buzzes died off one by one, replaced by the occasional branch crack, distant crashes of falling trees, and that horrible rhythmic tremble in the dirt. like thunder, far off and random, but always getting closer. Somewhere, one of them was moving. I didn't dare light anything, just reached into my pack, found the flare gun Brinks had taken off the dead recon soldier, and made sure it was still loaded. It was. Only one shot. We slept in shifts, if you could call it sleep. Every time I started to drift, something creaked, something rustled. The wind would shift and bring with it the sour stench of rot and wet skin. And each time, I thought I'd open my eyes and see a foot the size of a truck cab descending from the canopy. By morning, we were both soaked in sweat, covered in ants, and starving. Our MREs were running low. 2 packs left between us. I handed Brinks one and forced myself to eat half of the other. No fire, no warm food. Just cold, chemical chicken sludge and protein bars that tasted like chalk. Then we moved. The jungle was a different beast during the day. Brighter, yes, but it only made the shadows feel sharper. Every tree looked like it had been pushed aside at some point. Every vine hung low, like no one had cleared this place in centuries. We moved in silence, staying low, rifles up. The goal was simple: find high ground. We'd lost our original route days ago. No GPS, no signal, just a compass and instinct. Around noon, we found another footprint. Brinks was the one who spotted it. He froze, raised a hand, and pointed. It was fresh. The edges still held shape. No water pooled in the heel yet. Leaves around it were flattened, not scattered, like the thing had stepped there just hours before. And there were more. 3 of them, leading west, straight into a part of the jungle where the trees grew in tighter and darker than anything we'd seen so far. I looked at Brinks. He didn't speak, but his face said it all. If we kept following our current path, we'd be walking right into one of their migration corridors. We needed a detour, badly. We doubled back east, angling toward what looked like a lighter patch of forest. The terrain sloped gently upward. That gave me hope. High ground meant visibility, maybe even a spot to signal extraction if the flare worked. But within 30 minutes we knew we weren't alone. It started with sound, that strange hush in the air. Then the snap of a tree somewhere behind us, not close, not even in line of sight, but deliberate. We ducked under a rock overhang and waited. Brinks was trembling again. I didn't blame him. The last time we heard a sound like that, 3 of us died in 30 seconds. Then the birds took off, not all at once, just little bursts, first to the left, then the right, each one flying in the opposite direction of a single slow-moving source of pressure. The trees began to sway. I held my breath. Then I saw it, far off, through the gaps in the canopy, a shadow moving between trunks. It wasn't coming toward us, not exactly. It was circling, moving parallel to us, and behind it, more trees breaking. Not 1, 2, maybe 3. My heart pounded. They weren't coordinated, but they were all drifting the same direction, west to east, straight through our path. Brinks looked at me, whispering, "We're in the middle of it." He was right. This wasn't just a few stragglers. This was a herd, 6, maybe more, all walking through the jungle like it was open field. We dropped flat to the ground and crawled beneath a thicket of fern and moss. The air was thick with that same awful stench, sweat, blood, meat. Brinks pressed his face into the dirt, trying not to breathe. I did the same. The closest one passed less than 60 yards from us. Its feet rose into view first, gray and blotched, each toe thick as a fence post. Then came the knee, then the sagging muscle of the thigh. The torso was lost in branches. The arm swung low, so low I thought it would brush the ferns, but it didn't. It just walked past, not fast, not slow, just constant. Another followed, and another. They moved like a wave, not organized, not together. Just parallel masses pushing through the jungle in the same general direction. I counted 6. After the last one passed, the trees behind us kept swaying for almost a full minute. That's how long it took for the rest of them to clear. Brinks raised his head slowly. His eyes were red. I thought they'd hear us breathing. I didn't say anything, just listened to the thunder of receding footsteps. Then the ground went still, and the smell faded. We waited 10 more minutes before moving. The forest to the northeast looked thicker, but it also had a rise. We headed that way, slowly, making sure to step on rocks and firm roots to leave as little trace as possible. 2 hours later, we reached the slope. At the top, the trees opened into a wide outcropping of bare stone. From there, you could see for miles. Jungle, endless and green, rippled like a sea. I scanned the horizon for anything. Smoke, a signal, a chopper, a fire. Nothing. Just wind and green and silence. The jungle opened into a clearing, a cleared clearing, artificial. Trees had been knocked over in a perfect circle, their trunks stacked neatly around the perimeter like a fence. At the center, a pile of bones. Human bones. Dozens, maybe more, arranged in a wide ring. We backed away, slowly. As we turned to leave, I noticed something etched into the bark of one of the fallen trees. Words, scratched deep, by a human. It read, "Marching line." Whoever had seen them before us knew this was a path, knew the herd followed a route, and died marking it. We didn't run, not right away. We walked until we couldn't see the clearing. Then we ran until we couldn't breathe. We ran until the clearing disappeared behind us, swallowed by trees and fog and the reek of rotting leaves. Brinks didn't speak. I didn't ask him to. We didn't need words. Every root we tripped on, every snapped twig underfoot, reminded us that something massive could be listening. We stopped at a rise of stone where the earth lifted into an uneven ridge. It gave us elevation, a sliver of dry ground, and just enough distance to catch our breath without exposing ourselves. The moss-covered slope behind us made good natural cover. The only sound was Brinks panting, eyes still wide, his back against the rock like he wanted to crawl inside it. "How many bones were in that clearing?" he asked finally, voice hoarse. "Too many. They've been doing this for years, haven't they?" I didn't answer. I just nodded. We stayed put for a while, checked gear, counted ammo, 1 mag each, 1 flare, no grenades, 1 at 4 slung to my back, our last chance if something came too close. No food left, no radio, no one coming. I unfolded the crumpled paper map we'd taken from Keller's kit. Most of it was useless. The paths were overgrown, the markings outdated, but we could still see a river marked 2 clicks southeast. Maybe a water source, maybe even a path out if we followed it downstream. We moved at first light. The air was thicker than before, not humid, just dense, like the jungle itself was heavier. The trees leaned closer together, the leaves drooped, everything was wet, slick to the touch like dew hadn't burned off in decades. We followed the terrain downhill, watching for sign, and we found it. Just before noon, we came to another broken trail, trees knocked over in a rough semicircle, branches twisted, sap leaking from trunks like open wounds. We crouched at the edge, more prints, massive, sunken deep. But this time, they overlapped, crossed in different directions. This wasn't a migration path anymore. This was a feeding zone. There were signs of struggle, blood in patches, a torn boot, shreds of dark fabric half buried in the muck. I saw a spent shell casing. NATO issue. Someone else had been here, fought, died. Brinks stood over the print. "Look at this one." He pointed to a smear beside the deepest impression. Something had been dragged, a human probably. The trail led toward a low valley choked with vines. We didn't follow it. We moved wide, circling east. The birds stopped again around mid-afternoon. That same instant silence, like the jungle flinching before something massive passed overhead. We dropped low, waited. Then we heard it, distant but steady. Boom, boom, boom. The trees across the valley rippled, not just in movement, they bent, pushed aside like weeds. Then came the grunts, not roars, not screams, just effort. Heavy exhalations, the sound of something moving bulk it couldn't quite carry. lungs pushing to power limbs the size of telephone poles. Then we saw it crest the far slope. This one was different, bigger, not wider, but taller, 55 feet, maybe more. Covered in thick matted fur tangled with vines, its head was sunken between its shoulders. Its arms reached past its knees, its feet smashed through the underbrush like it wasn't even there, and behind it, another and another. The herd had found us again. Brinks whispered, "They're not moving past. They're coming this way." He was right. Their path was angling down toward the ravine to our left, toward the exact direction we'd hoped to cross. I looked at the map, then the terrain. We had one option: get to the opposite ridge, cross the ravine before they entered it, or we'd be caught inside. We ran. Not fast, quiet, deliberate, but quick enough to close the distance. We reached the ravine edge and found a downed tree spanning the gap. Narrow, slick with moss. Brinks went first. He crossed halfway before the vibration hit. The ground shook. My feet slipped on the edge. I grabbed a root, steadied myself, looked up. One of them had entered the ravine. Not 30 yards downriver. Its head was low, sniffing the air, dragging one hand across the stones like a child searching for something in a sandbox. Brinks froze. "Don't move," I whispered. The giant stopped, turned slightly, raised its head, then let out a grunt. It wasn't a roar, wasn't a warning, just acknowledgement. It saw him. It charged. I didn't think. I dropped the AT-4, unslung it, braced the tube on my shoulder. Brinks jumped. I fired. The rocket caught the giant in the collarbone. Direct hit. The explosion lit the ravine. Smoke, flame, dirt. The giant fell, slumped forward, half collapsed against the slope. Blood sprayed across the rocks. But it wasn't dead. It moved, twitched, tried to rise. Brinks landed hard on the other side, rolled, screamed. His ankle bent wrong, badly. "Go!" I yelled. "GT up!" He tried, didn't make it. The giant roared, not pain, not anger, just noise, pressure. Its hand shot forward, scraping rock, clawing at the slope. I grabbed Brinks under the arm, dragged him, rifle slung over my back. The giant climbed, with one arm. I didn't know they could do that. It was bleeding, one eye missing, half its shoulder gone, but it still came. We climbed the far ridge, Brinks limping, me half carrying him. We reached the top. The giant was halfway up. I pulled the flare gun, my last shot. I aimed not at the giant, but at the trees above it. I fired. The flare hit the upper branches and ignited dry moss. A fireball erupted. The giant stopped. The fire spread fast. Old dry wood, oily leaves. The canopy collapsed. Burning branches fell onto the giant's head, back, neck. It screamed. Finally, it screamed, not in fury. In pain, it dropped back down the slope, didn't move again. I dropped beside Brinks, coughing, vision blurred. Smoke rose behind us. Fire burned down the ravine. The herd would see it. They'd smell the blood, and they'd come. "This is it," I said. Brinks nodded. We both knew. No one was coming. No radio, no air support. Just two men, one rifle, and miles of jungle owned by monsters. But we'd killed one. With a flare and a lucky shot, we'd killed one. They could bleed. They could burn. That was enough for me to stand. The jungle burned behind us. Not a full blaze. Too damp, too thick. But enough to light the sky orange and fill the trees with smoke. The crackle of branches, the hiss of wet bark, the rising hiss of steam from the leaves. It all built into a sound that made you want to run. But we didn't run. We couldn't. Brinks sat on a flat rock, ankle twisted at an angle no human body could walk on. I'd splinted it with a broken rifle stock and paracord, but it was useless. His leg was done. If he stood, he'd drop. If he tried to move, he'd scream. I had half a canteen of water, one working rifle, and 5 rounds of ammunition. And the sound was coming again. That thunder, boom, 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 not one, many. They were coming toward the fire. I don't know if it was the smoke or the blood or the scream from the one I'd burned, but something had changed. The herd wasn't migrating anymore. It was approaching. I crouched beside Brinks and checked the tension on his splint. He looked at me with cracked lips and sunken eyes. "I'm not going to make it out. You might." He laughed. "Don't lie to me now." I didn't argue. "I'll stay here," he said. "You go." "No, I'm dead weight." I tightened the strap around his boot. "If you think I'm dragging your whiny ass through another click of jungle," I muttered, "you've got another thing coming." He didn't respond, but I saw it in his face, relief, not because I'd stay, but because someone was still choosing to fight. The ridge we were on curved around the edge of a hill shaped like a knuckle. On the far side, the terrain dipped into a gully of half-flooded brush, a decent hiding place if we could get to it. But to do that, we had to move across the exposed slope, and the herd was coming from the left. I slung my rifle, lifted Brinks under the shoulder. He clenched his teeth and grunted. Together we moved 6 feet, 12, 20. That's when I saw them through the smoke. Figures, massive, gray and black and hair matted, stomping through the trees like a column of ancient machines. They weren't quiet. They didn't sneak. They couldn't. They flattened everything. The first one stopped at the base of the ridge, turned its head, and sniffed. I froze. Brinks did too, one arm hooked over my shoulder, the other clutching his side. The giant stepped forward. Another behind it followed, and another. We were in their path, 30 feet of open ground. I couldn't run, couldn't carry Brinks fast enough, couldn't shoot my way out, so I did the only thing I could think of. I dropped us both to the ground, rolled us into the trench just off the trail, more like a washout than a trench, shallow, filled with leaves and wet mud. Then I grabbed muck and leaves and smeared them over us, covered Brinks's back, his arms, his legs, did the same to myself. We laid flat, silent, praying. The footsteps came closer. Brinks started shaking. One of them walked right above us. I could see its foot, flat and wide, pocked with old scars and fresh wounds. Blood dripped from its ankle, thick and black. The sole flattened a vine 2 inches from my face. It paused, sniffed, then moved on. Another followed. This one dragged something behind it, something limp, something human, a body, stripped to the waist, legs shattered, hair matted with blood. They were bringing food back, not just scavenging. Brinks clenched his eyes shut. I grabbed his arm, held it tight. Then, a low grunt. Another stepped close, too close. It leaned over. We held our breath. Its hand dropped, dug into the leaves, pulled up a clump of wet roots and fungus. It wasn't searching, it was eating. And then it turned, stood, and walked away. Boom, boom, boom. More passed. Some were smaller, 40 feet, maybe less. Some were massive, bulky, scarred, older. None of them looked down. We weren't prey. We weren't even noticed. We waited in the mud for another 10 minutes, then 20. Then, finally, the ground stopped shaking. The smell faded. The jungle was still. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Brinks opened his eyes. They didn't see us. No, they don't see us. He sat up slowly, face pale, hair plastered to his forehead. It's not just size, it's perspective. We're ants to them. I nodded. He looked off in the direction they'd gone. Where did they go? I didn't answer, because I didn't know, and I didn't care. We were still alive. That's what mattered. We moved again, slowly, painfully, crawling through the brush down into the gully. It wasn't deep, but it was overgrown enough to hide in. We found a patch of dry roots beneath a split tree and collapsed there. I checked the rifle. 4 rounds, no flare, no rockets, no hope. Brinks leaned back, eyes closed. We're not making it to extraction. No, then what? I didn't speak, because I was thinking the same thing. But then I heard something. Voices, not booming, not inhuman. Radios. I froze, listened. Brinks heard it too. He sat up, winced, grabbed my arm. There, faint, crackly, then clearer. Charlie 3, this is Falcon 6, do you copy? Over. I scrambled for the radio. Nothing. Dead battery. Brinks fumbled into his vest, pulled out the cracked handset from the dead recon unit. It was smeared with blood, barely holding together. He clicked the call button. "Falcon 6, this is Bravo 2-3, he rasped. "We are alive. 2 remaining. Grid unknown. Surrounded. Request evac." "Over." Silence. Then, "Say again, Bravo 2-3, did you say 2 survivors?" "Over." I grabbed the mic. Confirmed. 2 survivors. We're in a natural gully. North slope. Fire visible. Giants headed east. We need immediate extraction. Over. Copy. Bravo. Extraction inbound. Hold your position. ETA 20 minutes. Stay low. Keep signal active. Brink stared at me like I'd just resurrected his mother. "They're coming?" I nodded, and for the first time in days I felt something crack through the terror. Hope. But it didn't last, because less than 5 minutes later we heard the trees crashing again. Not behind us. In front of us. One giant. Just one. Limping. Burned. The one I'd shot. It had followed us. It was still alive, and it was angry. Brinks reached for his rifle. I put my hand on it. "No, not yet." We waited. It passed the ridge, stopped at the trench, sniffed, turned, its one good eye locked in our direction. And this time it saw. It stepped forward. Boom. Again. Boom. Then it started running. Straight for us. I raised the rifle. 4 shots, not enough. But it was all we had. The burned giant came straight for us, crashing through the gully brush like a freight train on 2 legs. It wasn't faster than before. But now it wasn't wandering. It wasn't lumbering through the trees with slow indifference. It was charging, limping, hunched, blackened from fire, leaking pus and blood, but charging, straight toward us. Not because it remembered us, not because it planned revenge, because something had hurt it, and it recognized the shape of what did. Me. I leveled the rifle. Brinks was half laying, half pushing himself upright. His ankle was swelling purple, his skin chalk pale, eyes barely tracking. But he was still conscious. The giant let out a grunt, thick, guttural, wet. Then it barreled down the slope. I fired. The first shot hit its upper chest, didn't slow it. Second shot caught the shoulder. A muscle twitched, still it came. Third shot missed. Fourth, it clipped the cheekbone. A shard of gray flesh peeled off like torn bark. Still it came. I slung the rifle and grabbed Brinks under the arms. No more running, no more hiding. We had to move. The evac bird was supposed to arrive within 10 minutes. If we could just stay ahead of the giant, just keep it back long enough for them to spot the fire or us, we had a chance. We didn't head downhill. That was a trap, a pit full of wet brush and steep rocks. Instead, I dragged Brinks uphill toward a line of ridged granite slabs that split the ridge like a natural wall. "Come on, stay with me," I muttered. He grunted. The trees behind us snapped like toothpicks. The giant was climbing. It didn't roar. No warning, no emotion. Just the sound of its feet ripping into the earth and its hands tearing through trunks like they were reeds. I hauled Brinks over the first slab. The granite was slick with rain moss. My fingers slipped, my shoulders screamed, but we crested it. The second slab had a ledge. I dropped Brinks into the shallow dip and turned. It was close now, closer than I expected, closer than I could survive. The top of its head cleared the ridge. Its arm reached up, clawed into a boulder, and pulled its mass forward. Its body was scorched black on one side. Skin hung like boiled leather. One eye was gone, the other locked on mine. It lunged. I jumped sideways. Its hand came down hard, slamming into the rock where I'd stood, cracking the stone, sending dust and shrapnel flying. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up limping. Brinks raised a hand. "There," he pointed up. I saw it. A glint, something metallic, rotors, the chopper. It wasn't above us yet, but it was close, maybe a click west, banking over the tree line toward the smoke plume from the earlier fire. I grabbed the last flare cartridge from my belt. The casing was cracked, probably useless. Still, I slid it into the broken flare gun and aimed toward the sky. The gun fired with a muted cough, barely enough to launch the shell 20 meters. It arced weakly, then flared red, a weak flare, but still visible. The chopper veered. The roar of its engine grew louder. Below, the burned giant reared back, grabbed a rock the size of a water tank, and hurled it upward. The boulder missed us by 20 feet, smashed into a tree, and exploded the trunk like a grenade. I turned back to Brinks. "We stay here, we die." He nodded. I pulled him up again. His legs buckled. We moved as fast as we could, uphill, toward the widest patch of exposed ground. I saw the chopper now, black, twin rotor, open bay. A man leaned out holding a scoped rifle, scanning the ridge. I waved both arms. The giant howled again, a guttural rattling sound that wasn't language, wasn't even rage, just pressure. It climbed higher. It was almost on us. The chopper passed overhead once, then circled wide and came back lower. A spotlight cut through the smoke. It hit me square in the chest. Brinks collapsed behind me. I turned, slung him over my shoulder in a fireman's carry. The rotors thumped louder. Rope dropped. I grabbed it. The winch started. We rose 6 feet. Then the rope snapped tight. The winch jammed. The bird hovered in place. The pilot waved arms frantically. The weight was too much. I looked down. The giant was there, reaching. Its hand came up like a wall. Fingers grazed my boot. I pulled higher, one arm over the rope, legs kicking. Below, Brinks was coughing, barely conscious, clinging to the side of my body. We rose another 5 feet. The giant lunged. Its hand caught the rope. Everything snapped. The chopper jerked sideways. The rope pulled taut, and then the anchor ripped free from the floor. The giant tumbled backward, losing balance. The rope fell. We crashed. I landed hard, felt my knee twist sideways. Pain shot up my leg. The chopper circled wide again. The giant stood, bleeding, wobbling. Then it charged again. No plan, no coordination, just instinct, to kill, to eat. I looked up at Brinks. He was bleeding from the mouth, eyes open, but empty. He was gone. I didn't even have time to process it. I just grabbed the rifle, limped to my feet. The giant swung its arm like a falling tree. I ducked, barely missed being crushed. Then I raised the rifle point blank and fired straight into its eye. The bullet disappeared into black. The creature staggered, and the chopper reappeared. This time, it didn't hover. It dropped fast. 2 gunners leaned out, opened fire with mounted M24Os. Tracer rounds tore across the ridge. The giant screamed again, its last. Blood sprayed in fans across the stone. The chopper pulled in low, the bay door slid open. Hands reached out. I limped forward, stumbled, collapsed onto the deck. The door slammed shut, the world lifted away, and the jungle finally disappeared behind us. The flight back to base was silent, except for the rotors and my breathing. They strapped Brinks's body to the floor beside me, covered him with a tarp, but I could still see his boots. His hand, one finger still bent from when we broke it, pulling him out of a collapsed trench 3 days ago. I couldn't look at it for long. The gunner next to me kept glancing over like he wanted to say something. Maybe sorry, maybe shocked I was alive. But he didn't. I think the smell coming off me, smoke, blood, mud, something worse, kept him quiet. When we touched down at the forward operating camp, the medics were waiting. They rushed me off the bird, took my rifle, my vest, even cut off my boots. Someone stuck an IV in my arm. A nurse gave me water with a straw. I hadn't had clean water in 3 days. I cried when it hit my throat. Then came the questions. They brought me into a prefab unit with buzzing fluorescent lights and a folding table in the middle. 2 officers waited for me. Black fatigues, no insignia. One had a clipboard, the other just watched. "You the last one?" the clipboard asked. "Yes. Name?" "Staff Sergeant Nathan Caller. Unit? Recon Charlie. 12 men, all dead. Except Brinks. He died during extraction. The man didn't write that down." "Describe the enemy." I stared at him. "You already know what they are. Describe them anyway." So I did. I told them everything, what we saw, what we heard. The first one, standing over Evans like it was picking fruit from a vine. The second one that came out of the mist. The herd, the fire, the mud. The fact that I'd put 5 rounds into one and it just kept coming. That we dropped a flare on its back and it still climbed a ridge with half its chest burned open. How many? At least 9 in the herd. Maybe more in the jungle. Clipboard frowned. That contradicts earlier recon reports. No disrespect, I said, but your earlier recon reports are based on dead men. Still no reaction. Were they organized? No. Did they communicate? No. Any sign of higher function? No. They're not smart. They just move, eat, kill. What was their behavior when wounded? Unchanged. Except the one I burned. That one chased me. I think pain made it fixate. But not revenge, just instinct. Clipboard wrote that down. Then he asked, did it ever speak? No. He leaned forward again. They were moving west. Yeah. You think they were migrating? No. Not anymore. Why not? They were following something. Following what? I swallowed. Then I said, us. He tilted his head. You mean your unit? No. I mean humans. Towns, roads, villages, noise, wherever there's heat and flesh and blood. That's the direction they were going. The man tapped his finger once on the table. Then he stood and left without another word. I was transferred to a recovery unit after that. Clean sheets, IV drip. Quiet. They didn't let me talk to anyone else. No phone, no internet. Just a cot, a medical chart, and a nurse who came in twice a day with food and antibiotics. I asked her how many made it back from the jungle. She said I was the first, the only. 3 days passed. Then one night just after midnight, a new man came in. Not a medic, not military. He wore a suit, gray, neat, no name tag, no clipboard. He closed the door behind him and sat in the metal chair by my bed. Staff Sergeant Collar, he said. Yes, I read your report. I didn't respond. He smiled thinly. I need you to understand something very clearly, he said. What you saw wasn't an isolated incident. I know. We believe the herd you encountered is one of 4 that hit me like a shot of ice water. 4? Confirmed. Possibly more. I sat up, he went on. The region you were dropped into, Quadrant Echo, was designated a hot zone due to satellite footage capturing canopy-level displacement. We expected a migration path. Instead you found a population center. He nodded. We believe they breed, slowly, like elephants, maybe slower, but it doesn't matter, because they don't die. They can die, I said. I killed one. He smiled again. You helped kill one. I didn't reply. He stood, walked to the window, looked out over the base, floodlights, shipping containers, chain link fences. There's a town 60 kilometers east of where you were recovered, he said. It hasn't responded to radio in 24 hours. My blood ran cold. We're sending in a heavier team, he said. Not recon, armor, drones, air support. You think they'll do any better? He looked back at me. They won't do worse. I looked down at my arm, at the dried foreport, at the gauze over a wound I didn't remember getting. When do you move? I asked. He smiled. You're not going anywhere. Wasn't asking about me, I replied. He turned and left. They brought me back before I'd even finished the last round of antibiotics. Didn't ask, didn't order. Just handed me a uniform, drove me to the edge of the compound and told me to get in. The vehicle was black, unmarked, reinforced. Inside was a single operator, helmeted, visor down, gear too polished to be standard issue. He didn't talk, just drove. I watched the jungle through the armored window, a line of green that never seemed to end. They didn't take me to the jungle. They took me to the wall. I didn't even know we had a wall. 50 feet tall, curved in sections, armored with scrap steel and thick wire netting. It didn't look new. It looked desperate. Weld seams still smoking, bolts fresh, paint flaking from a hasty seal job. There were guns on top, not rifles, emplacements, anti-material platforms, 50 cals, mortar tubes, spotlights. A line of shipping containers formed the inner perimeter. Inside them, teams of soldiers moved like they were expecting a siege. The man in the black gear dropped me at the command trailer, then he was gone. Inside, I found a familiar face. The clipboard officer, no name tag, still calm, still clean. "You're back earlier than expected," he said. "Not my choice." He handed me a file. 4 hours ago, contact was lost with Strike Team Delta. I flipped it open. 16 men, mechanized support, 2 drones, lost without a single distress call. "You said they were going in heavy." "They did. Didn't matter, did it?" He didn't answer. I dropped the file on the table. "Why am I here?" "You know their movement patterns. I know where one group was walking." He nodded. "And now they're walking here?" He walked me over to a digital map. Live satellite data stitched with old topography. Dots marked units. Red zones marked sighted activity. One of those red zones was right outside the perimeter. "How far are they?" I asked. 6 miles. I felt it then. Not fear exactly, not yet, but something deeper. The realization that this wasn't about teams anymore. This was about holding a line. "There's a village," I said, "about 10 miles east. Dirt roads, 2-story concrete homes, women, kids. They don't even have radio." "We know." "You evacuate?" He didn't answer. That told me everything. Outside, I heard engines. A column of armored vehicles pulled into position. APCs, mobile artillery, even a decommissioned tank with jungle vines still wrapped around the treads. They weren't preparing to scout. They were preparing to dig in. I stepped out and looked over the barricade. I couldn't see them, not yet, but I felt them. A pressure in the ground. Not like thunder, more like the tremble before a storm breaks, when the sky darkens and birds vanish and the air starts to hum. Operators passed me with ammo crates and radio packs. Some looked scared, some looked too calm, none looked ready. The sun dropped behind the tree line by late afternoon. The jungle dimmed, but the sky above the wall stayed pink with haze, smoke from brush fires, or worse. I found a quiet spot beside a water tank and waited. Just like the first time, listening. The jungle didn't go quiet all at once. It dimmed, bird calls slowed, insects stopped buzzing, a silence spread out in rings, one I recognized. I stood. Someone near the wall pointed. There. The first shape stepped out from the tree line. It wasn't fast. It didn't need to be. It was one of the taller ones. Scarred chest, long arms, its feet flattened brush with every step, leaving deep prints that filled with water. Then another emerged beside it, then 3 more. A herd. They weren't charging, just moving. They didn't need stealth. They knew we were watching. Gunners moved to positions. Command barked orders. Radios clicked with readiness reports. Then a horn sounded, one long blare, a warning, and the sky erupted in searchlights. The entire wall lit up. Dozens of beams cut across the clearing, locking onto each creature in the open. Their skin was gray and slick in the light. Their heads turned, not in confusion, just awareness. The first shot came from the far turret. A 25mm shell screamed across the field and struck one giant just below the hip. It buckled slightly, then straightened, took another step. More shots followed. Tracer lines arced through the air. Some hit, some didn't. The ones that hit sprayed black blood across the clearing, but none of the giants fell. Not yet. Then one roared, not high-pitched, not guttural, just loud. A pressure wave that flattened a patch of trees beside it, and they started to run, not fast like sprinting humans, but a kind of charging lope. Each step ripped the ground, each stride covered 15 feet. The front one hit a mine. The explosion took out part of its leg. It dropped, then got back up. Blood sprayed from its knee, but it still came. They hit the first trench line. Explosives went off. A cloud of dust and dirt and fire. I saw limbs torn off. One went down completely. Its face caved in from a direct shell, but the others surged forward. The wall vibrated from the force of it. Then the giants hit the barricades. Two slammed into the fencing, posts bent like coat hangers. Another reached over the wire and ripped a gunner from the platform. I heard him scream, then I didn't. The tank opened fire. A shell burst against one's chest. It staggered, turned, and stumbled to its knees. We were hurting them, but there were too many. I grabbed a rifle from the supply rack and ran to the edge. A sergeant shouted at me, recognized my face, didn't care what my orders were. He handed me a belt of extra mags. Then I saw it. The one from the jungle. The burned one. Still alive, still limping. It walked with a strange hitch in its gait. One leg half dragged, one arm twitching. But it was here. It had followed us all the way back. I raised my rifle, fired 3 times. It flinched, swatted at the air, then turned toward the flash. It saw me, started toward the wall. A spotlight hit its face. Gunners opened fire. I ducked as return debris sprayed up from the platform. Then the giant rammed the wall, hard. The whole section shuddered. Bolts flew loose. The second impact split the seam between 2 plates. Water pipes burst behind us. I fell, scrambled, raised the rifle again. The burned giant stepped back. Then lunged, and the wall broke. A section peeled inward. Crushed wire, snapped poles. The giant forced its body through. I aimed and fired again, emptying the mag into its chest. Someone threw a grenade. The blast knocked me backward. When I stood, the giant was down, dead finally. But more were coming. Behind me, a voice screamed into a radio, "We need to pull back now." The inner line, what was left of it, was already collapsing. I turned, looking for the command tent. It was gone, crushed under a piece of the fallen wall. Only smoldering debris left. Smoke filled the air. I looked past the breach and saw more figures coming through the trees. Not running, just walking, relentless. The first line was broken. We were no longer holding them back. We were just trying to survive what came next. There's no line anymore. Just a blur of smoke, shouting, muzzle flashes, and the deep, endless thudding of footfalls. The giants didn't sprint. They didn't scream. They just kept coming. 2 more had broken through the southern barricade, toppling floodlights and dragging tangled wire through the mud behind them. One had a gash across its gut, intestines half dangling. It didn't stop, didn't slow. Its face was slack, eyes blank, legs moving like pistons. One arm swung low as if half broken. Still it walked. I fired into its chest. Nothing. Someone behind me threw a thermite grenade. It struck the giant's ribs and exploded, burning through layers of fat and muscle. But the creature kept going, burning like a moving funeral pyre. That's what we were fighting now. Not animals, not monsters. Corpses that didn't know they were dead. Someone grabbed my vest from behind and dragged me backward. A private, no older than 20. He pointed to the fallback tunnel, one of the container corridors reinforced with steel sheeting and sandbags. It wasn't meant for fighting, just evacuation. "Go!" he screamed. "Fall back to the trucks." I nodded, looked around for anyone else. Nothing but bodies. Smoke rolled through the wrecked barricade. On the other side of the wall, a silhouette moved, then another, towering, plodding. A shadow of mass and weight and death. I ducked into the corridor. The floor was wet. Water from burst pipes ran through the path like a stream. I passed soldiers trying to carry wounded. One man was missing his jaw. Another clutched an open abdomen, intestines held in with duct tape and trembling hands. We kept moving. Then, behind us, a boom, not from a weapon, from a footstep. The corridor shook. I turned. The burned giant, the same one. Its body had been peppered with holes. Its skin had split across the neck. dangling like charred curtains. It wasn't alive. It wasn't anything. It was still moving. I raised my rifle, fired. Someone else joined me. A captain, 3 more behind him. Rounds poured into the thing, carving flesh from bone. It reached forward, grabbed a cargo crate, and threw it. The metal box smashed the tunnel entrance, sealing it in twisted steel. The last light from outside vanished. We kept running. Ahead, another light, flickering, the loading bay. 6 trucks sat in position, engines already running, tires spattered with blood. A crew chief waved us forward. "Get in! Get in!" I dove into the nearest flatbed, landing hard on top of ammo crates. Others followed. Then the last man through, the captain, turned, pulled a satchel charge from his vest, primed it, and slammed it into the tunnel wall. He didn't make it onto the truck. He stayed. The charge blew. The tunnel mouth collapsed behind us. The truck peeled out. So did the others. We bounced down the slope, engines whining, gears grinding, mud splashing over the sideboards. I looked back once. Behind the smoke above the trees, I saw a shape rising, a giant, then 2, then 5, all of them heading the same direction we were, toward roads. Toward towns, toward us. We hadn't stopped them. We just redirected them. The next base was smaller, not much more than a repurposed village square with razor wire around the perimeter. Locals had already evacuated. The remaining civilians, about 30 of them, sat clustered in a church-turned-field hospital. We didn't tell them what we were running from. Didn't need to. They saw the smoke. They saw the blood on our boots, and they listened to the silence when the birds stopped singing. I stood on the roof of the clinic that night, watching the horizon. The air was still, moon high, and then, barely audible, I felt it. That pressure again. Not noise, just movement, far away, but coming. The others pretended not to notice. The ranking officer, a woman named Reyes, came to me at dawn. She didn't ask what we'd seen. She just said, "Can they be stopped?" I said no. She nodded. Then she said, "Then we don't stop them. We evacuate everything west of here, every road, every town." I looked out at the jungle beyond the fences, and I said, "It won't be enough." That was 6 days ago. Now I'm back in uniform, but not with a rifle. They've made me an advisor, a survivor. That's what they call it when they don't have a better word. It means you lived through something no one else did, and now they think that means you understand it. I don't. No one does. The giants aren't intelligent. They don't need to be. They don't adapt. They don't coordinate. They don't need to. They just come. And when you kill one, another follows. They don't mark territory. They don't retreat. They just walk. And eventually, they arrive. They don't leave trails like animals. They leave gaps, places where people used to be, villages with crushed buildings, fields with rows of footprints the size of bathtubs, bones, always bones. I don't sleep anymore. I listen. The sounds are always faint, distant, but getting closer. The last message we received from a recon drone was garbled. One image made it through. A town, half buried in ash and dirt, empty, and in the center, a shape. Slumped, bent, eating. The timestamp was 2:14 a.m. The connection cut 10 seconds later. That's how it ends, I think. Not with a scream, not with a warning, just a thud. A tremble, a shadow, and then nothing. The convoy leaves in the morning. I'll be on the lead vehicle. Not because I want to, because I need to. We rolled out before dawn, 5 trucks and what was left of a fighting force. The road ahead was barely a road at all. half-washed-out clay riddled with potholes that could snap axles. No one said much. Between engine growls and the slap of mud under tires, it was all silence, each of us wondering the same thing, whether the next herd would overtake us before we could even unload. The plan came from someone far above us, a colonel whose boots had never sunk in jungle soil. The gist of it was simple: dig a trench, line it with metal, and fill the earth below with explosives. Let them fall in, detonate. The fire and steel would do what bullets couldn't. It sounded insane, but we didn't have many options left. Everything we'd used so far had only slowed them down. They chose an eroded stretch of terrain 3 miles south of Highway B-6, a low valley with a narrow mouth that could funnel the giants straight into a kill zone. 3 bulldozers had already started carving a trench by the time we arrived. The civilian engineers greeted us like we were the last line of sandbags on a rising river. They'd already coated the sides with diesel and marked the soil where they'd hit shallow bedrock. Everything else was guesswork. The theory was brutal and primitive. Giants breathed passively by the sheer weight of their own guts. They didn't have diaphragms like us. If you ruptured the cavity low enough, cutting into the gut and piercing the blood web that fed the lungs, they bled fast and didn't get back up. The flare I used on the burned one hadn't been what killed it. It bled out from a deep puncture wound when it tried to stand. That was the key. That afternoon we planted shaped charges, bags of ammonium nitrate soaked in diesel, each set beneath sharpened rebar spears sunk into the trench bed. 30-pound sacks fitted with shock tubes and old mining caps. It was crude, but we didn't need precision. We needed force and volume. When the charges went off, the theory was the pressure wave would launch the spears straight up through whatever had the bad luck of standing overhead. Gut to heart, mass trauma, fire would finish anything left. By the end of the first day, we had half the trench rigged, rebar angled in a crude forest of spears. Fuel drums buried under the outer lip, wired to spray burning gasoline when ruptured, a scaffold with a kill switch, and a single exit causeway just wide enough for one truck to cross. That was our escape path, and if the timing was off, it'd be rubble before we ever reached it. The second night, rain came, light but steady. We laid tarp and sandbags to keep the detonators dry. The air felt heavy, wrong. I didn't need a seismograph to feel it. At 1642, the ground spoke. The first vibration was faint, like someone dropped a cinder block 10 miles off. Then another, closer. The trees along the northern slope trembled, not from wind, there was none, but from a ripple that moved through the trunks like breath. Then they emerged. 7 shapes at first, massive shoulders brushing branches aside, some with dried blood still caked across their skin. One had an open wound across its flank, black and crusted but still raw. They didn't run. They didn't even seem to notice us. They just walked, heads forward, footsteps carving wide bowls in the earth. We took our positions, infantry behind the berm. 2 armored trucks stationed at either end of the trench with mounted 50 cals aimed toward the mouth. The air was so still I could hear the distant thump of each step. Like war drums, but slower, final. The first one reached the trench and slipped. The grade was steeper than it looked, and the diesel worked. Its foot slid, caught nothing, and the whole body tumbled forward. It landed chest down across the center of the pit. One rebar spear punctured its belly but didn't go deep. Another sank into its thigh. Thick, dark blood oozed out. The second giant followed too fast. It tripped over the first, half-spun, and fell sideways. A sharpened post entered beneath its rib cage and tore diagonally through its gut. It convulsed. The third hesitated but was shoved by the fourth. Then 5 more came behind. In seconds, 8 giants were tangled inside the pit, some upright, some crawling, none dead yet. Reyes waited until the 9th stepped forward. She keyed her mic. One word, now. The earth didn't erupt so much as heave. There was no fireball, just a wave of force, like the entire trench had become a lung exhaling upward. Dirt launched skyward. Rebar spears ripped through flesh. Limbs tore free. Blood hit the air like rainfall. A second later came the sound, rolling thunder that hit the body as much as the ears. Then the fire followed. Fuel drums ruptured. Thermite charges lit. Orange flame whooshed into the sky and coated the pit in flame. Through the smoke, I saw a torso collapse on itself. A leg, still twitching, launched 20 feet clear. The smell was unbearable. Iron, fat, burning meat, and mud. One of the giants crawled toward the edge, trailing half its guts, but never made it. 2 more had stayed outside the trench. They tried to turn back. Reyes detonated the slope charges behind them, blowing their knees to pulp. One collapsed backward. The other landed face first and didn't move again. Silence followed, then smoke, then stillness. We waited. 10 minutes, then 20. Nothing moved. When we approached, weapons raised, what we saw was chaos turned to finality. The kill box worked. 8 dead inside, 2 more downed. Not a single one had made it beyond the trench. We torch cleaned what was left. Flamethrowers were out of fuel, so we used thermite and gasoline in jugs. The smell of charred blood filled the valley for hours. Back at base, Reyes didn't smile. She just said one word, repeatable. And that's what we did. Within 2 weeks, 2 more quake hammer rings were dug on the eastern and southern edges of the conflict zone. Civilian engineers refined the design. They added magnesium shears, huge spring-loaded scissor traps that could sever a giant's legs at the shins when stepped on. Others devised funnel corridors made of shipping containers, painted to resemble the fungus the giants often scraped from trees. They walked right in. We didn't outsmart them. We didn't need to. They weren't smart. That was the point. They followed the path of least resistance, gravity and instinct. We just gave them a road. The next herd came 10 days later. 12 giants. Only one made it past the halfway point. Magnesium shears got the others. The survivor bled out in a pit. We started winning, not because we had better weapons, but because we used the ground itself. Terrain, force, leverage. Giant bodies bleed like anything else. Mass is a weakness when you can't protect your vitals. No one ever gave speeches. No one called it victory. We just kept digging. Eventually, they stopped coming. Maybe we killed enough. Maybe they moved on. Maybe the earth finally said, no more. I still walk the perimeter sometimes. Still feel the tremor in my feet when I think too hard about silence. Sometimes the moon looks like bone. The air tastes like ash, but it passes. And when it doesn't, I find a stretch of earth, drive a rebar spike 6 feet down, and remind myself. Mass bleeds, stone doesn't.